A PETA employee, an African American, speaks from the heart about animal rights, George Floyd, and Black Lives Matter. Next on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this behind-the-scenes look at PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. Since May 25th, despite a pandemic, the nation has grappled with the reality of another parallel virus, that of institutional racism in America, specifically police brutality toward African Americans. The video of a white Minneapolis policeman with his knee on the neck of an unarmed African American, George Floyd, for nearly 9 full minutes was so brutal and shocking. The nation saw Floyd's murder with their own eyes, and it's compelled communities big and small from coast to coast to go out in the streets to protest. PETA President Ingrid Newkirk was out in Washington, D.C. protesting. The organization released a statement. As always, PETA stands firmly with the movement to eradicate white supremacy, racism, and injustice. As an organization that harnesses the power of protest, we support the right of individuals to assemble in a free country and to make their voices heard. We stand for an end to oppression. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. On the PETA blog, Zachary Toliver, an African-American and a PETA senior online content producer, expressed his feelings in an essay, Why Animal Rights Activists Must Stand Up for Black Lives. I talked to Zachary about his life, how he came to veganism and to PETA, and why those in the animal rights movement have a reason for being powerful allies. Toliver said, if we truly believe in empathy and compassion for all living beings, we can show it today. My conversation with PETA writer Zachary Toliver on the PETA Podcast. I want to thank you for doing this. I know it's usually a good conversation when people get on without any problem. So that means you're under 30. It means you're, tech savvy, and it means you know what you're talking about. So that's good. That's a good sign, So, yeah. So, I know you're cool. So that's good. First of all, I love the blog post, Why Animal Rights Activists Must Stand Up for Black Lives, because the animal rights movement is generally an incredibly white movement. And it's good to see young African Americans and young Latinos. PETA has a Latino division, and it's good to see Asian Americans. It's good to see animal rights be so diverse, because that really is a true reflection of our society and of the world. So tell me about yourself, Zachary. How did you discover veganism and animal rights?
Yeah. Before going fully vegan, I was vegetarian, and that was really kind of based on environmental reasons. I was an environmentalist, like in that realm of activism for a long time, like as a teenager and stuff like that. I rescued a dog though when I was like, I don't know, it's been quite a few years now. She's 10 and I rescued her when she was a puppy. So like about 10 years ago, I guess. And one night we had a thunderstorm, really bad storm. And it was the first one that my dog Zero experienced. And she had kind of ran and hid inside the bathtub. And when she did that, it sort of, I realized that not only is she scared right now, but she's scared for her life. For her, she thinks this could be, the end. And I recognize that this living being, she's just as fearful for her life and wants to protect it in by any means necessary, the same way that I would, if I was being threatened. And in that moment, I kind of realized it's not just her. Like all animals, all living beings feel this way about their lives. And so from that point on, I just couldn't justify anything that exploits animals or that takes their free will away from them. not when they feel this way about their lives.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm sure you must have seen or been exposed to other things either through movies or in books or maybe family, friends. And I'm sure you had meals come out before you that were, well, you were vegetarian, you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you had already been sort of like turning your nose at when meat was coming up to the dinner
Mm-hmm.
table. But what was it about this animal, you think? I mean, it was this specific moment, and you can describe it so clearly. What was it about it that
Yeah.
just got to you?
I think, seeing her, I mean, she went and hid in the bathtub, and, coming from the Midwest, we're always taught to, if you don't have a cellar or a basement, when a storm hits, go try to find an inside, closet, or go try to like literally hide in the bathtub. And I was like, Zero knows to do this instinctually, versus me, I had to learn that.
Yeah.
So it also spoke to this level of intelligence that she just has. And I mean, that moment for sure. I mean, don't get me wrong. I apparently, like my pops, he told me when I was a kid that they told me where chicken actually came from, that it was an animal. I'm sure, like in my 4 or 5 year old mind, I thought maybe it just grew like a vegetable. I don't know, but they caught me trying to flush it down the toilet because I didn't want to eat it. So I'm guessing that it was just kind of inevitable that I would eventually end up writing about animal rights.
Yeah. So where did you grow up? What you Midwest or I know you're in the West Coast now, but where did you grow up?
Yeah, it's sort of all over the Midwest. I spent a lot of time in Southern Illinois. That's like where, if anybody asks where I'm from, that's usually what I say. But I've lived in Illinois, Missouri, South Dakota for a little bit. Would not recommend it. North Dakota.
Well, big ag states. Big ag states
Yeah.
you're from, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
And also they're cold. They're cold. So I lived in Missouri for a while. I know what Southern Illinois is like. Big ag
Yeah.
states, and the sensitivity hit you when you were 10 years ago. You're growing up, and so now at that point you were fully vegan.
Yeah. And I mean, not gonna lie, like, definitely had some slip ups in like those first few years of like, just trying to avoid all the animal products that are in our food and whatnot.
Yeah.
My wife currently, when we first started dating, I feel like that, because she was vegan as well. And that's like when it really like sunk in that, having that extra person there.
Yeah. You have reinforcements, and when you're weak, and it's okay to have, as you put it, slip ups. It's not perfection, right? Because 98 or 99% of the time you're trying to be good, right? So that's cool.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, all right. So here you are, an animal rights activist. You're writing this thing. You see the Black Lives Matter movement just blow up when George Floyd gets really murdered, before our eyes. It's the videos up there. And you write this very eloquent piece on the PETA blog. And the first line says, "Fellow animal liberators, I come to you right now as an exhausted Black man." That's like first line, early drop the mic moment, but you can't because you just started. Can't drop the mic there. But, it's a startling, image. Why are you an exhausted Black man right now?
I feel like it's just like, how many times have we been through this? How many times have we needed to have not only conversation, but like direct action? And, it's just like, I mean, I'll be 29 next week. And I just feel like I've lost count of how many times that we've seen this, not like literally seen it, like literally have had it on camera and, experienced the same conversation over and over again. And it's just tiring. And it's tiring to be like, I mean, I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in a lot of like white communities. So even it's exhaustion from the point of like, for a lot of people that I've come across in my life, I'm their one sole like how they like ask my opinion on how they should feel about this or whatever, and it's just sometimes it's just tiring, like having to explain this over and over again when we know it's unjust, it's happening in front of us all the time. It's just so much, and it's just like just tired, just like tired of having like I love the analogy when people say is like, if you're tired about hearing about racism on the news, imagine how tired Black people are of it. Like it gets to you.
Well, you were exhausted in that very first sentence, but you were just building up for this tremendous essay you're about to write. And immediately, what lifts you up, what's apparent, is that you rely on, well, your first words, fellow animal liberators. You see the connection between the two causes. How did you put it together? How did you put it together? How did you link it for yourself?
Yeah. For me, I feel like the vegan community is very activist driven. We're a lot of us are very big on the activism side of animal liberation. And I feel like if the vegan community is as compassionate and has, this empathy for every life, then they should be out in the streets, because, my life is in jeopardy right now. People who look like me were in jeopardy. It's a life that needs help right now. So I think if we truly are that community of empathy and compassion, then it makes sense that we would support Black Lives Matter.
When you say your life is in jeopardy, how real is that statement? How much in jeopardy are you?
I feel like it's in jeopardy. No one likes getting pulled over by the police. Mm-hmm. Right. That's just how it is. But I don't know if my white friends have the same thoughts going through their head. I don't know if they have their license and ID and everything at the top of their car where they don't have to reach their hands down just in case. I don't know if that's the reality for other people. And every time I've had an interaction, it's like, this could be one that goes wrong, and not only for police, but just for racism in general. I've been in some situations where it's just like, man, this could be dangerous for me.
Let me stop you right there. When you say you have your wallet up on the car, and I grew up in Black neighborhoods, and I had friends. We lived in Washington D.C. for a while, and I had Black friends. And I always noticed that that's what they did. They get in the car, I give them a ride. They get in the car, they put their wallet up on the dashboard. And I said, well, what are you doing putting your wallet in the dashboard? Or what are you doing put your wallet up, right? And they look at me funny, like, don't you know? Yeah, shouldn't you know? And I said, no, I don't know. I mean, I'm asking you, why do you take your wallet out all the time? And then they tell me, well, this is what my father told me, right? That you put it up there so that no one thinks you're going for a gun. And when you understand that, I think a lot of people get it then, Yeah. I mean, it's not I, as I'm like halfway along the color line, I'm like, I'm not white, I'm not Black, but I'm like right in the middle there. And sometimes I get a pass either way, but there have been times when I haven't been given a pass, and they've thrown me in the back of a caged car, checking out my ID, waiting to see that, okay, he's all right. And this really happened. I got pulled over one time, and I'm Filipino American. I've got relatives on the police force in San Francisco. And when they heard my name on the scanner, they said, "Oh, he's all right. He's all right." And then suddenly I'm in the Blue Line Brotherhood, right?
Yeah.
But thank goodness I had relatives who were cops. But the Filipino cops are Black cops. The thing is, if you're part of this legacy, you hear this from your father, right? I
Yeah,
gather that's
yeah.
where you heard it, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like that's just a conversation that you just have as a kid, especially. Like, yeah, it's that reality.
Yeah. I think that unless people have real black friends or they've, buddied up and given some of their black friends a ride, they may not have noticed that. I don't know. I just know that when
Hmm.
it first happened to me, I just said, "What are you doing taking your wallet out? I didn't need any money. I'm giving you this ride free." Yeah.
Right. It's wild. Like I remember one time. So I was the president of the environmentalist organization, at MSUM. Shout out to Minnesota State University. Uh,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
when
All right.
I was late for a meeting, and I was taking, because we always collected recycling, and I was taking the recycling to the recycling plant. Uh, Real quick on my way to the meeting, and I was running late. I'm trying to do all this, and a couple police officers pull up and they start questioning me about, like, what am I doing there? I'm obviously recycling. I have bags of cans in my hand. I'm obviously recycling. And they asked what I was doing here, and that there's been like suspicious activity in the area. They asked to search my car, and I'm just like, no, I'm late right now. Like, no, I don't have time to deal with this. Like please, like, just can we move this along and whatnot? And like, they held me there, they
Yeah.
ran my name, trying to find a reason to like be able to search my car. And like, I know I have nothing in there, but like, I'm not going to give them the benefit of, harassing me right now. Like, I can't even recycle while black. Like, damn.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is a reality that black people understand. I mean, the black people undergo that generally people of color, like myself, we understand because we've had degrees of that sort of scrutiny or that sort of like overbearing kind of, treatment. And there's nothing you can do.
Hmm.
You don't really fight back. I mean, you fight back in different ways. You fight back by standing up at, when it's time to stand up. But when you
Yeah.
saw what happened to George Floyd, you said
Hmm.
that this was a time for your animal rights liberators, your animal liberators to understand that they can be powerful allies, whether you're black or
Hmm.
brown or white, because
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
what have your colleagues, have they embraced it, do you think? Or do you think did it come naturally or?
I do feel like a lot of people have embraced it. And, I've, written for PETA for like nearly 4 years now. And I gotta say, of everything I've ever published, this one has by far received the most love. Like, I've received messages from not only colleagues but other vegans that I don't know about, that they just came across the article, and like they found me on social media just to say how much they love the article and how much they love the perspective. And I've received some messages that it was like, I wasn't even a part of this movement. I wasn't even at any demonstrations or protests until I read your article. Now I'm planning on going out. And that's just been wonderful. Like, I mean, not only as a fellow vegan, but as a black man, like that's wonderful to see. And like, I'm glad that it's resonating on some level with people.
Now, you make the point by telling people to look at the evidence. Look at
Hmm.
what is on video, and you made the link between the George Floyd video and the videos that PETA almost routinely uncovers through its
Hmm.
investigations. And tell us about that. How, I mean, it was obvious to you clearly. I mean, it must have been
Hmm.
obvious to you when you first saw, those videos of mother cows crying for their stolen
Yeah.
calves that you refer to.
Yeah. Just because, like, I mean, there's so many times that we show videos of just blatant cruelty to animals, that just horrific. And like, it makes me think of that frustration of people trying to justify this, evidence that's right in front of their face. And that's that same frustration and just like anger that I feel when people see a tape like George Floyd or, Eric Garner, or hear a story about Trayvon Martin, and they try to find these like weird, mental gymnastics ways to justify what happens. And like, that's just like, that's a reality in the animal rights movement so often. It's just like, you can't ignore this. That's right in front of you. Like, there's a line that's, it's like, when you see this video, you can no longer claim ignorance. You can only claim apathy. And I feel like that's correct for both movements, whether it's animal rights or Black liberation. Like, at the end of the day, both groups, both movements want accountability. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's a major connection as well.
Well, it's apathy, as you say, or it's complicity, right?
Yeah.
Either
Absolutely.
you're with it or you're against it, right? Or you're against it or you're with it. And you don't want to be with it, you want to be against it. One would think.
Mm-hmm.
But tell me, all right, so you got generally people embracing it who are your non-Black animal liberator colleagues and cohorts and sympathizers and all that. But how about the Black community? Because we know that the Black community, just from the numbers, I mean, we know about their health and their eating patterns, and we also know that some people in the Black community would take offense when you say, "Hey, you're talking about animals, and we're talking about a Black man who was killed, and are you equating the Black man to an animal?" I mean, there are some people who would make that argument. But what do you say to those critical factions that would come back and say, they would even say, "Oh, animal liberation, that's not like, liberating slaves. I mean, we're not animals." How do you deal with that line of criticism that is out there?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. That's when I wrote this article, I wanted to do it from a perspective of like, here's why animal rights should support Black Lives Matter versus here's why Black Lives Matter should also support animal rights. Like, I didn't want to necessarily compare tragedies. I wanted to compare emotions and feelings and reactions to, unjust sort of atrocities. I feel like that's where we find that unity. So I didn't want to be like, oh, I don't want them to seem like they're the same. Like, each tragedy, each injustice deserves its own focus. It deserves to keep that focus. So when I have fellow Black people that are just like, oh, what, do you care more about animals than you do your own people? And it's like, no, it's not like that. Like, it's not this either or thing. It's both to me. Like, but if I'm at a Black Lives Matter demonstration, I'm talking about Black lives right here, because like, that's where the focus is. If I'm at an animal rights demonstration, I'm talking about a specific animal, like animals' lives right there. So it's just like, I just want the focuses to be maintained without this like whataboutism of, trying to, say, oh, this one matters. Why doesn't this,
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
Well, it does. It does. But, you still would face some criticism from some of your, your Black colleagues, or not colleagues, but, who are in the Black Lives Matter movement, who are, they might, because I've seen people say, you can't equate animal liberation with the liberation of slaves. They're not the same. They're not, and in many ways, there are similarities, and they're enough to say, look, we are, as you point out, we are allies. We are fighting for this. We're fighting against the same injustice, or the same kinds of injustices that exist.
Yeah. And like, when I use the language of like, I've written about animals, let's say like in the entertainment industry, like, that is enslavement. Like, they're not choosing to be there. Like that, like, what else would you call it? And I've had critiques from Black friends like, oh, you're calling them slaves. And I was like, dude, like, yo, you cannot, like, to say that if anytime we talk about slavery, means that we're talking about black people is in and of itself racist. Like, don't equate, black history just with slavery like that. Like, enslavement is a way to describe this, injustice. It's not necessarily saying that it belongs to a group of people. And I don't want it to belong to anybody. Like, it's weird to me when I get that critique, because I'm just like, yo, that's backwards thinking to me.
Yeah. How about when people say, Black Lives Matter, I'm a vegan, Black Lives Matter is cool, but all lives matter. What do you say to the all lives matter people?
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. That's again with the whataboutism, because it's not, Black Lives Matter doesn't say Black Lives Matter more. It doesn't say only Black Lives Matter. It says, that it seems like to the system that Black lives don't matter at all compared to white lives, like, or, other pieces of privilege, or, I don't like the all lives matter, like, language, especially when it comes from the vegan community, because if we're truly vegan, we already know all lives matter. We don't have to say this phrase that's been weaponized to, delegitimize, Black Lives Matter. Like, we don't need that phrase. We're already there. Like,
yeah. Well, that's true.
But yeah.
You just have to stand up to them and say, look, we're allies. We're not saying that one life matters more than the other, and we're not saying that that the lives you're concerned for don't matter. So
Right,
the all lives matter is it's just another bit of rhetoric that's thrown in there to be a kind of speed bump, right?
and it's used to kind of dismiss the conversation at hand. And kind of what I was talking in the blog too, like, it reminds me of going to demos and doing something, and someone's like, oh, how can you care about this animal when children go hungry, or what have you, or whatever excuse they're going to try to use. And it's just like, again, both of those issues matter, but we're here at this demo doing something specific for this message right now. And so I feel like, when people hit me with the all lives matter stuff, it's like, that's not what we're talking about right now. Like, it's a very focused thing.
Yeah. So I know that you say you like this term, calling your colleagues, you say fellow animal liberators. We know the power of protesting and demonstrating. Use it now. And, as we talk, we've seen the memorial. We've gone through the initial phases of the protest. The president has come up with his fake reaction. We have seen, now we've got, it's clearly in the hands of the justice system and the jockeying by the lawyers to see what kind of justice is meted out. And everyone knows it's not going to be easy to get justice for George Floyd, even with the evidence of a video. I mean, it's not impossible, but to try to get justice against a cop is not easy. But now we've got 4 cops against each other. We're sitting back and looking at it. But as President Obama said this week, he said, hey, you got momentum. Don't give up. What do you think is going to happen with the protest? Where do the protests go now? And does your appeal to your animal liberator colleagues extend to this after period that the protests need to continue?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I have no idea where it goes from here, because it seems like the momentum is actually, like, there's signs of progress all around us. There was a killing right here in Tacoma, of a black man who was in police custody, and it happened in March, and I'm pretty sure just this week they ruled it as a homicide. And then you have, I think what was the LA mayor, took $150 million from the police department and is putting it towards, like, community initiatives. You have Virginia taking down Robert E. Lee statues. You have like all these signs of like, yo, people are listening, and like the powers that be are listening, and trying to make these changes. But at the same time, I hope that the pressure that we're putting on the system right now doesn't let up, because until legislation is on the books, until it's actually put in action, until there are like big defunding of the militarization of police, I feel like we shouldn't let up. And I don't know what that's going to look like, or what these protests are going to evolve into. I know that a lot of people are donating, and a lot of people are getting involved, and I really hope that when it comes time to vote for attorney generals and prosecutors, I mean, those are elected positions, and we want them to go to bat for us. I hope that the same energy is going to be at the ballot box. But yeah, I don't know where it goes from here, but I do hope that everyone who's taking action and involved right now, and that is also my fellow vegans, and I hope that they still stay involved when the time comes for additional action.
Well, in a lot of ways, though, it's sort of like after a PETA victory, after a vegan victory, after a successful undercover investigation exposes videos and sends it out to the world, and or maybe after a legislative victory, the protest, the fight for animals continues, and so every little incremental victory in Black Lives Matter, in the fight for justice for George Floyd, means that we just continue, right? We just continue fighting until every last vestige of racial injustice, which is like the impossible dream, right? But it's got to go on, right? It's got to continue in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's actually a really good point too.
Your last point in your essay, you talk about being a Black vegan and tiptoeing between two identities. You mentioned that there are more and more African Americans becoming vegans.
Yeah, and I love to see it too. Because I mean, I've written about Black veganism a lot, and there's so many issues that impact the Black community because of systemic racism that, like, of course, like maybe going vegan is not going to solve all of those, obviously, but I feel like it is a political statement in and of itself. Like, it's no coincidence that we live in food deserts, and that some of the most unhealthy products in America for food is targeted towards Black people. Like, like going vegan and living vegan is kind of like a direct action against that colonizing, and I love it, and I feel like a lot of Black folks are catching on to that. To be healthy in a system that wants you to be unhealthy, especially as a Black person, like that's one of the most activist things you can do, is to stay alive.
Yeah. The whole thing about, you talk about food deserts, and during the protest, there's one instance in particular in the south side of Chicago where, there was looting at when the few stores that was in the south side to provide people with the fresh vegetables and the good food, and not necessarily processed stuff, but there is processed stuff there too, and there's meat, but there's also the option for better food, good food. And the looters went in and destroyed the store. And it's like there was some looting, and then there's the other good folks who are trying to clean up the glass and trying to tell the looters to stop. And it's heartbreaking because these kind of things happen. Fortunately, more people in general were peaceful protesters, sticking to the point, and not, the kind of opportunists you see who spoil things. And I hope that doesn't become the image. But, when you talk about food deserts, and south side of Chicago isn't Detroit, but we know why there are farms, urban farms in Detroit. And that's because the grocery stores, the supermarkets won't go into some areas of Detroit and won't put up more than just a liquor store in Detroit. And people have to grow healthy food on their own. So we know why that happens. So this is one of the bittersweet things about this past week that you see, and just hope that we can all overcome, and then we can get the corporations to put those stores in, and we can get the corporations to change the kind of products they sell to the Black people and people of color. But it's still, you're right. The most direct action you can take is by going vegan.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And that changed things. So look, Zachary, I really appreciated seeing your blog post on the PETA blog, and I hope other people see it. And anything I didn't talk about or I didn't touch upon that you want to get off your chest and say now on the PETA podcast? Because one of the things that I always complain about, I don't really complain too loud. I mean, it's not really a complaint, but I want to see the animal rights movement become as diverse as America. I want to see it become as diverse as the world it's trying to change. And there are instances, certainly, the PETA Latina, you're writing the blog. There are more African Americans talking about, hey, athletes, right? Saying, hey, I'm vegan. That's great. But I think you made the point that it's going to be an even more powerful movement when we start seeing these alliances that are truly out there, and make them before something like a George Floyd situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing too. As a vegan, and as the vegan community and as the animal rights community, we don't need everybody to like us. We don't need every person who's marching in the street right now to like us. That should be irrelevant, because there are lives at stake. There are lives that are being oppressed. And like I said earlier, if we're that community of compassion and empathy for, every single living being, then we should be out there regardless. And I have to say that a lot of, like I said, a lot of people have seemed to read this article, and it's resonated, and I'm so happy for that. And I really hope that support keeps going, because both movements, we both want the same thing. A lot of the times we want, accountability. We want, legislation reform. We want people to hear our message. We want people to educate themselves and be educated allies. So yeah, I really, I don't know where things are going, but seeing all the love that poured in from writing this, it's made me a little bit more hopeful than I've been in a long time, for sure.
Zachary Toliver, a writer for PETA and the PETA blog, Why Animal Rights Activists Must Stand Up for Black Lives. It's on the PETA blog. Zachary, thank you for being on the PETA podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Zachary Toliver, PETA senior online producer, on his essay, Why Animal Rights Activists Must Stand Up for Black Lives. You can read it at PETA.org. And that's our program. You can contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok, that's EMILAMOK, or on the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund blog, that's aldef.org/blog, or on amok.com. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on Apple Podcasts where you can rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music is provided by Carbon Works. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.